meditate for some time, then we'll see. So we begin a new chapter today. 81. आपको ये पाली पढ़ना ठीक लगता है कि परेशानी होती है?
नहीं, तो ठीक है। This much is fine.
परेशानी होती है तो मैं पढ़ लिया करूँगा। feel like reading it. मुझे तो बहुत अच्छा लगता है। So Pakilaka means miscellaneous. So there are verses, not there is no common thread between them. वो मैंने अलग अलग कर रखा है ना उसको। मत्ता सुखा परिच्छेद परित्याग
पश्चेच विपुलम सुखं तजे मत्ता सुखं हीरो संपस्तन विपुलन सुखं।
Guess what is the meaning? मत्ता मात्र सुख परित्याग, और छोटा सा सुख से उसको त्याग कर देना चाहिए। पश्चेच विपुलम सुखम, अगर विपुल सुख बहुत भारी सुख को देखो तो छोटे को छोड़ने में कोई दिक्कत नहीं होनी चाहिए। सजे मत्त सुखम धीरो, वाइज वन, the abundance is small happiness, sampasam vikulam, seeing a big happiness, a large happiness, and can easily abandon. A wise person should abandon this small happiness. So this is the story. There is a quick story. Actually, the original story which I read from that reference didn't make much of a sense because it was partly. So I took it from another source and it made some sense. It is about the incident when Buddha is invited by Vaishali for because there is a lot of famine and people are suffering from various kinds of illnesses. So the king and one of these Vaishali people invite him in the hope that his coming will bring in good rains and other things. So I don't know whether we can bring in some hair. So we don't need rains. So they bring him there and there is rains, and then he recites the Ratana Sukha. He asks Ananda to recite the Ratana Sukha. So after that, when they return, then you find that bhikkhus are discussing the power of Buddha and how he has done this and that. So then he tells them that all this is because of small deeds which I had done in past lives. great benefit which I got suddenly got out of it. And then he gives this story of the past life. And that's how Jataka arrived. He gives the stories of a past life that in one of the time he was a Brahmin and he was lived in Takshila. Takshila is now in Pakistan. So he had a son named Susina who he sent to another person for study. His son had a spiritual inclination, so he was not much satisfied with that. So he directed him to approach a saint who happened to be a Pratyeka Buddha. So he asked him to become a bhikkhu and then gave him training, and he became very quickly enlightened. So when the merchant came in, Brahmin came in search of his son, and he found that he had already died and a stupa had been erected for his relics. So he was very much distressed and he had some reverence for the stupa and he cleaned it. It was lying in a jungle probably. He cleaned it up and then paid respects, and then he brought some flowers from the jungle and tried to pay respect because they told him that he had become enlightened. And it is said that because of his past deeds, Buddha tells that because of this small young man's past deeds, he was now getting respect and benefit and kind of reverence even from his father. So in a similar manner, we should also abandon small things and look for greater happiness if it comes by serving, even doing even small acts of kindness.
Is this some form of Nirvana?
No, it is when an Arhat dies, it is said to be Parinibbana in the sense that he is not going to be born again.
So then how come if he has achieved Parinibbana, how do we relate this to previous birth of Buddha?
Buddha attained Parinirvana in that birth when he was Buddha. In the previous births, he was not a... he was talking about his past birth when he was still a Bodhisattva.
Right. And then he achieved Parinibbana in that.
Not in that.
Ashram.
He attained Parinibbana when he became a Gautama Buddha.
When you leave your body in the last birth.
In this story, he was the Brahmin, not the son.
Right, but this one says Susima did not live long, he realized Parinibbana.
Yeah, but it is his father. Buddha was the father of that person at that time, Brahmin. He rejected his roti of his past experience when he was a Brahmin by name Sankha.
Oh, okay.
His son at that time realized.
Right.
But then he paid respects to him. And then he told them that because of enlightenment, even his father was paying respects to him.
Yeah, I thought he himself was that.
He was only the father of that boy.
Par dukha upadhanena atano sukha michhati vera sanya saga samasatho vera sona parimuchati.
पर दुख उपाधानेन, पर दुख मतलब दूसरे का दुख, उपाधानेन मतलब जो इस पे इन्फ्लिक्ट करता है, इम्पोज करता है दूसरे पे दुख. क्यों? अत्तानो सुखम इच्छति, अपना सुख इच्छा करने के लिए. इट्स क्वाइट नियर हिंदी इफ यू सी इट. अत्तानो मतलब अपने लिए, सुख इच्छति मतलब इच्छा करता हो. तो जो अपने लिए सुख चाहता है दूसरों को दुख देता है. वेर संसर्ग सम्मत को, वो वेरा मतलब वैर में बंधा रहता है. इट मीन्स ट्रैप्ड इन द बॉन्ड्स ऑफ हेट्रेड. वेर सो न प्रमुच्यते, उसका वैर जो है कभी समाप्त नहीं हो सकते. कैन नेवर बी फ्रीड फ्रॉम हेट्रेड. सो a person who wants to his own happiness by inflicting suffering on others will always be tied by the bonds of hatred. So that is the story associated with it. So this story may sound very strange to you. It is a story of a woman who had a hen. So the hen would lay an egg and that woman would eat it up every day. So she didn't give an opportunity for even one to be hatched. So the hen was always feeling bad about this. And she started hating the woman. And he said as a result of it, again in some other life they were born together, causing pain to each other. And this happened number of times. So in one of the times of the Buddha, one was born as a woman, another was born as an ogress who eats up the people. So the woman was with her husband and son. The husband went to take part and she rested with her son. And at that moment the ogress appeared and attacked her. So she ran away and then went to the monastery. And then Buddha recited the story that you are carrying this hatred for lives together. And then they agreed, काफी हो गया. Let us give up harming each other.
यनि किच्चम अपाविद्रम अकिच्चम पन्य कैरति उन्नलानम कमत्तानम तेसम वद्धन्ति आसव.
दूसरा भी उसी के साथ है, सिमिलर. So you can read the other one also. सुसमृद्ध
नित्यं कायगता सती अकिच्चम तेन सेवन्ति किच्चे सातचक्करिणो सतानं संपजन्यम अर्थम गच्छन्ति आसव.
ये दोनों एक ही इंस्टेंस के हैं, so we can read them in that sense they are together. यनि किच्चम अपविद्धम. किच्चम मतलब कुछ भी जो अपविद्धम one rejects, gives up. अकिच्चम पन कैरति. जो किच्चम मतलब जो करनीय योग्य है, जो कर्तव्य है, जो काम करना चाहिए उसको तो वो छोड़ देता है. और अकिच्चम जो करना नहीं चाहिए, पन कैरति, उसको करा है. उन्नालनम पमत्तानम. पमत्तानम मतलब प्रमत्त है, नेग्लिजेंट है. उन्नालनम प्राउड है. तेसम बढ़ंती आसव. उसके आसव बढ़ते जाते हैं, बढ़ंती में बढ़ते हैं. So those who give up what ought to be done and do what ought not to be done, those who are proud and negligent, उनके आसव, their attainments keep on increasing. Then but ये संच सुसंबद्धा नित्यम कायगता सती. लेकिन जो ये समझो सुसंबद्ध है, जो फिक्स्ड है, नित्यम कायगता सती, नित्य जो कंटिन्यूअसली उनकी स्थिति माइंडफुलनेस बॉडी के साथ रहती है, ऑलवेज माइंडफुल ऑफ द बॉडी. अकिच्चम तेन सेवन्ति. वो अकृत्य काम को सेवन नहीं करेंगे. वो अकृत्य काम जो है, जो करने योग्य नहीं है, उसको नहीं करेंगे. किच्चे सात्कारिण. और जो करना चाहिए उसी को काम करने, they will be perseverant in doing that. सत्तानं संपजानानं अर्थम गच्छन्ति आसव. तो उनके जो आसव है अर्थ को प्राप्त होते हैं, समाप्त हो जाते हैं. कौन लोग हैं? सत्तानम जो सती में पृष्ठ है, और संपजानम जो वाइज लोग. सो दीज पीपल हु आर वाइज एंड माइंडफुल, जो कायगता सती जिनकी बनी रहती है, their attainments come to an end. That is the meaning. And the story is about, again it may sound very peculiar, that in one monk, in monastery in Baddiya, many monks, and there was a competition among them that who will make a better slipper. So when Buddha came to know that क्या कर रहा है, is this the competition you are supposed to engage in? Then he tells them that it is not what you are doing this work. It should be seen as a necessity that you have to make a slipper for you, not you feel proud about I can make a better one than other. So he decided these two verses and told them to work for what ought to be done as a monk.
ये जितना अवेलेबल होता है उसी में
कुछ ना कुछ ढूंढ लेता है अपने mindset के हिसाब से to live according to that
Other
mindset.
things to compete with this.
Very interesting, we have learned about and monks. Many stories we have seen. Monks' behavior, which may sound very funny to us today. Good. Your game.
बैठने का
लाइट ही जला
जरूरी बैठने का
आप वो चला रहे हैं? वो आपने लगाया नहीं?
वो एक्चुअली हम शेयर कर लेते हैं बैठने थोड़ी देर लगाया
लाइट जला था ना वहाँ?
बड़ा
There is no competition among laptops. So we are coming to a new chapter today.
Yes, sir. Chapter 5.
Pain body.
Pain body.
It is pet theme of pain body in Pranakar topic.
And before starting with this chapter, just a brief recap about in chapter 4 was about role playing, and author mentioned about various roles people play, and he started with the role of victim, role of lover, and just one more role, villain, the role of villain being played. And then author also said about the social organization as civilization developed. The hierarchy was developed, and those hierarchies people started identifying with them, and they start playing those roles. In modern society there are no hierarchies, but the organizations people work in become the new hierarchy, and we start taking those roles more seriously. And additionally, there are the social roles like housewife or a macho male. People start identifying with those kind of roles. And then there are also temporary roles people play, like talking to a chairman of a company versus talking to a janitor. The way we interact with them, the difference in which we interact is the role we are trying to play with them. And then the chapter moves towards conscious parenting and says that are you as a parent trying to play a role of parent, or are you there for your child's needs and help child grow emotionally, or give child the attention that the child needs. And also says that sometimes when the child grows up, still the parent have that emotional need to be parent, and they can't let go of the fact that the child has grown up, and they still try to control the child, or and this kind of brings a lot of quarreling among the parent and the grown-up child, because the child will want his own space. And then the chapter moves to the section of collective ego, where one attached as a collective group, one can try to do lot of bad things which one may not have done individually. And the solution which author offers is that as soon as you know that the role which you are playing, there is this gap happens between you and the role, and this is the liberating factor away from the role which one is playing. And so that's a summary of chapter 4, and starting with chapter 5, the pain body. And the actual definition of pain body comes a little later. And the author initially starts with thinking. Author tries to make this distinction between the voluntary thinking and the involuntary thinking. And what he says that most of the time we are at the mercy of this thinking, and it is not that we are doing the thinking, it is the thinking which is happening to us. Thinking becomes involuntary, automatic or repetitive. And then author makes this statement that because of this involuntary thinking, we reenact our past again and again, and this is what the karma is. And I just wanted to ask this question, that how good is that?
Quite a practical definition.
Quite a practical definition. Yeah. And okay, there is this question from Silesh. Dhammapada verse 1, clearing grass and weed etc. He gained much benefit. Much benefit seems like a simple act. So is there a deeper insight here, as I see benefits much bigger than act? I think Silesh is related to the verse which we studied. Yes, the first verse. एक मिनट.
See, the act is not important, it is the intention behind the act which is important. Karma is Chetana. So you may be doing a simple act, but doing it with profound gratitude and respect and devotion, that will give you a lot of merit in that process. Small act can give a lot of merit. And a big act of setting up of a monastery with ego may not give much credit or benefit, because that may actually increase the ego. So it's not the quantity of the act, it is the quality which really matters. So did you hear it, and is it okay?
Got it. Volition is good.
So there is a statement of Buddha, Chetana aham vadami kamma. So kamma is Chetana. That is it which goes around and around.
But unfortunately, we forgotten this fact that the kamma is Chetana. हमारे कंडीशन में भी कर्म पे जो जोर दिया जाता है वो
फिजिकल एक्ट
पे ज़्यादा जोर दिया जाता है rather than how you do it.
That is a superficial understanding. ऐसा नहीं है. In the scriptures you find that statement of intention being important, but superficial understanding वैसी होगी.
Okay, and then the author continues with the definition of ego, and the author says that when we identify with this involuntary thinking, which is going on in our head. This leads to the generation of the ego. And then author relates various examples of what happens when we are absorbed in this involuntary automatic thinking. And the one example is that one is not present in the present situation. And this is obvious that when you are lost in thinking, then you are less and less aware of what's happening in the present moment. And another example is that one relates as the role one is playing. Because when we are in this involuntary thinking, we tend to believe that what we are thinking is the only reality, and the role playing becomes more stronger and doesn't feel is in any situation, any place, or with any person, not even with oneself. And this can generally typically happen when you have this negative thinking happening in your head, and you're taking it too seriously. Then this you won't feel at ease with the current situation. And the beautiful example which the author is gives is one is trying to get home, but never feels at home.
See, this definition of voluntary thinking and involuntary thinking. We had this discussion past several times about the free will. Many a times we believe that only when we are lost in a thought that is involuntary, but when we are not lost, is that free will? Because that if it is voluntary, then it's free will.
Well, it seems like free will. It's good to believe it. But if you deeply reflect the element of why we are thinking what we are thinking, you'll find that behind that also there is a conditioning, there is a cause, and you can trigger that. So the element of free will available is there. So it's a different kind of free will. It's not the free will of the kind that I can do whatever I like. ऐसा लगता है, actually हो नहीं रहा. We're all caught within our sankhara, our habit patterns. We work like that. Free will arises only when there is some element of wisdom. Then one can decide and choose according to wisdom. Otherwise, you're a conditioned creature, just moving around in a cloud, machine ki tarah kaam kar raha hai. Only thing is, the one who is running the machine is not visible. It is actually our habit patterns which are running the machine. विद्या के चक्कर में सब चलता ही रहता है. Only when there is some arising of wisdom, then we begin to feel ऐसा कि मुझे गुस्सा करना चाहिए कि नहीं करना चाहिए. Then you have some limited freedom.
So the arising of thoughts, that is not strictly random.
No. It is, you can think, when these people must be coding, must be thinking, क्या करना है उनको, उसके बगैर कैसे करेंगे? But when we are walking down and thinking all random things, खाना खा रहे हैं, पता नहीं क्या सोच रहे हैं, है ना? किताब पढ़ रहे हैं और अचानक से थॉट आ गया, नेट पे गए थे मेल जवाब देखने, वहाँ कुछ एडवर्टाइजमेंट में पता नहीं कहाँ चला गया, दिमाग ही कहीं चला गया, ना एडवर्टाइजमेंट देख रहे हैं, ना मेल देख रहे हैं, कुछ और ही सोच रहे हैं. So these are the kind of what he calls as the thinking in the head, voice in the head, which keeps on working on its own autonomously. हम बाद में कहते हैं I was thinking, but actually I was not thinking. Thinking was happening to me. I didn't want to think. ध्यान कर रहे हैं तो विचार आए जा रहे हैं, isn't it? You didn't sit down there to think. But thoughts come and we get lost in them continuously.
Correct. So you're saying that वो actually बिल्कुल अपने आप नहीं उत्पन्न हो रहे हैं, वो
conditioned है. They are not random in the sense that you don't know. Their past events are conditioning it. जो भी इवेंट जिसका बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग इफेक्ट है, संखार बच्चे अविज्ञान, पढ़ित समुत्पाद को याद रखेंगे तो विल बी अंडरस्टैंडिंग इट. एवरी टाइम द विज्ञान विच अराइजेस इज बेस्ड ऑन द पास्ट संखारा विच इज बिकम prominent at that time because of various reasons. So if your mind is concentrated on certain activity, then working within that confines. And this, you're not creating fresh sankharas if you're working with equanimity. Otherwise, sankharas keep on arising. When you are comparatively equanimous, then also sankharas, stored sankharas can arise. But the mind is so concentrated, you just ignore those things. Mind is not concentrated, then they slowly overwhelm. बार बार मान लीजिए कोई किसी घटना हो गई घर पे और आप काम कर रहे हैं जिसमें आपका मन भी है, कर भी रहे हैं, फिर मन शांत होने लगेगा, फिर वो विचार आने लगेगा ऐसा हुआ, फिर आप उसको हटा देंगे क्योंकि काम बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है या बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है या आपका मन लगा हुआ उसमें, जस्ट लेट गो ऑफ इट, देन दैट विल बी डिस्टर्बिंग अस फॉर अ वेरी फ्यू सेकंड्स. बट इफ द माइंड इज नॉट कंसंट्रेटेड, कोई ऐसा काम कर रहे हैं जिसमें मन भी नहीं लग रहा, तो वो उसी विचार में बह जाएगा जो उठा था. We are lost. The mind is wandered away, as we say. That is the biggest problem with the humanity today. Attention deficit, inability to concentrate, and strong sankharas which create disturbance.
So sankharas can be both negative and positive. The old habit patterns which are stored as sankharas, they can be both positive and negative.
But they both will give,
Both will come
result in rebirth.
And the word sankhara becomes very confusing.
It is used in a variety of ways, so that's why it becomes a bit confusing. It is used to denote anything which is conditioned. It is used to denote in Abhidhammic style those particular dominants of the mind, Chetika, some Chetika. So if we study Abhidhamma, then we can, there's a clear, crisp nomenclature.
So, in very literal terms, if we say that whatever conditioning which we keep on accumulating, that is the sankhara.
That is the way we behave, habit patterns which we exhibit is the result of those things which we have created. In our day-to-day life, we have created a sankhara of aversion, so I get angry every time. If there is slightest unpleasantness and I get angry, I get irritated.
So conditioning is more result of the sankharas which are accumulated.
Conditioning and sankhara, they strengthen each other unless we see through them. So sankhara will arise and they will eventually take to sarvasapachya vedana, and then the feeling will arise. Now if that feeling you enjoy or repel, then you are strengthening that sankhara. Habit pattern जो था स्ट्रेंथन होता चला जाएगा. लेकिन आपको विजडम आ गई, अरे ये तो बदलता रहता है, ज़्यादा परेशान मत हो, तो धीरे धीरे हल्का हो जाएगा.
So aren't conditioning and sankhara same?
They are in some sense same. Some sense they are same. You are using the term because conditioning is also referred to from the point of view of the surrounding which are conditioning us. उस सेंस में यूज किया जाता है ना. छोटा बच्चा है, पेरेंट्स उसको कंडीशन कर देते हैं, तुम हिंदू हो, तुम लड़का हो, तो लड़की है, लड़की को ऐसा रहना चाहिए. भारतवर्ष में बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है ना, लड़के रहते हैं, लड़के ऐसे रहते हैं. We are conditioning them.
We are conditioning, but that is what
They
they
pick
are
up.
conditioning, and that is what their sanskara.
They pick up. Yes, they pick up that conditioning from us. So it is used in that sense. वो कॉमन लैंग्वेज और टेक्निकल वर्ड्स का फर्क हो जाता है ना.
So conditioning or sanskara, whatever you call them, going back to what you were saying, good and bad, and so in some sense it's like the goal is to have a completely transparent existence where you are not colored. Sanskaras are like color. Now colors can be dark or bright, pleasing or unpleasant, but as long as there is some color on your existence, you will be not completely gelled with, you won't be transparent, and that's a sanskara. But what does good sanskara mean? Give some examples of good. So
I have the sankhara of generosity.
Right.
I have been conditioned by my parents. Suppose my parents have been doing generosity, and I have seen them doing right from childhood.
Right.
I also feel like doing
Now,
it.
how is this different than empathy that Buddha had for others? What is the difference between the two?
That is this generosity may or may not have ego in it. That is arising from pure mind. It's a natural characteristic. This is a condition. So the same person may get into a state of the mind where generosity becomes a natural manifestation of the purity of the mind. That is a
You're saying the generosity, even if a sanskara is better than having other kinds of sanskaras, though it may not be
free from ego. Ego free, it should be free from ego. It should naturally emerge, things which naturally emerge. So the person does not say that I am being kind or I am being generous. It's just happening. We all have that experience. It's not only Buddha had that experience. Especially with respect to children. Parents have that experience, mothers have that experience all the time. But they don't recognize it in that sense. Because when the children grow up, then you begin to feel the difference and then you begin to get into negativity. And so वो भूल जाता एक्सपीरियंस कि एक ऐसा भी एक्सपीरियंस था कि कोई फील वो क्वेश्चन नहीं उठता था कि मुझे करना है कि नहीं करना है. Isn't it? If the child is ill, the mother will not think यार रात के 12 बजे उठने का टाइम है उठूं कि नहीं उठूं. ऐसा नहीं होगा. Absolute communion of the child and the mother. Just get up. It's obvious. It's obvious.
even in that,
Slowly the attachment begins to manifest.
correct. So would she have done that for the neighbor's child? She would not have. So even in that,
There is that.
there is an element of attachment already.
Element of
So
attachment.
it's not pure.
No, it's not pure. Yeah. But you would see that most women in India at least, if they see a neighbor's child suffering, they feel equally empathy. There would be empathy. So that's something, I don't know, genetically there, or whatever you want to call it. But sankhara is there, feeling empathy towards a small child who suffers, whosoever it be.
This is sort of women men So
Yeah.
especially with kids, I have seen that.
That is true.
I can very strongly relate to it because when I see kids suffering, anyone's kids, somehow it's very hard to see it. I mean, I've actually intervened a few times and the results are not necessarily
Yeah. To make sense you are interfering.
but it's very hard to see a kid suffering.
Okay, and in this next section about the birth of emotion, the author tried to explain that what emotion is. And before explaining the emotion, the author wants to bring this definition of instinctive responses, and he says that these instinctive responses are more like how animals respond, and they are there in humans also. And these instinctive responses are body's direct response to some external situation. And the two examples which the author takes is primordial fear and primordial anger. And just explain that in primordial fear, in the fear of a danger, when the survival of the organism is threatened, the heart beats faster, the muscles contract, the breathing becomes rapid, in preparation for the fight or flight. And in primordial anger, when being cornered, a sudden flare-up of intense energy gives strength to the body that it didn't have before. And primarily reacting to a particular situation when one is in danger, these instinctive responses come. But the distinction happens here is that emotions are body's response to the thought, and the primary, so author essentially makes this distinction is that the body cannot make the distinction between the actual situation and a thought about it, which is like if you are having a fearful thought, then body can't distinguish whether you are actually in a fear, whether there is something danger to your life or this is imaginary, and then the body reacts the way that it's in a dangerous situation even though it's just a thought. And this is the emotion, and the author says that emotion is the body's response to a thought. It responds to the thought, its response to the thought seen through a filter of mental interpretation, the filter of thought. And the example which author gives is that it is likely that you won't feel any emotion when you are told that someone's car has been stolen, but when it's your car, you'll probably feel upset. Okay, and the next section is emotions and ego. And author says that very easily we get trapped in this vicious circle. The circle starts with this voice in the head which tells a story, and then the body believes the story and reacts to it. Then those reactions leads to emotion, and those emotions feed the energy back to the thoughts, and then those thoughts which create the further emotions, and then this is cycle of unexamined thoughts and emotions, and this whole thing leads to this emotional story making which happens. And possibly in this emotional story making one is creating the thoughts, negative thoughts, and the body is reacting to the negative thought as those are something which is reality, believing that that is a reality. And the author is talking about this conditioning, that this conditioning, your past conditioning gets involved in this story making and makes you believe the things. And the example which the author gives is that statements like people cannot be trusted. Now this is something which is coming from the past conditioning, probably some unpleasant childhood experience which conditions something and which continues and makes one believe. Then other examples are nobody respects and appreciates me, I need to fight to survive, there is never enough money, I don't deserve abundance, I don't deserve love. So these are all conditioning which one has probably acquired in the past, mostly in the childhood, which aggravates this emotions as those conditionings come. And the author says that unconscious assumptions create emotions in the body, which in turn generate mind activity or instant reactions. In a way, they create your personal reality, because we start believing that what we are thinking is right and the way we are seeing the world is right, and it becomes sort of our personal reality. And then the author makes a distinction between the negative emotions and the positive emotions. And he says that an emotion that is toxic to the body and interferes with the balance and harmonious functioning, uh, fear, anxiety, anger, bearing of grudge, sadness, hatred, or intense dislike, jealousy, envy, all disrupt the energy flow through the body, affect the heart, the immune system, digestion, the production of hormones, and these are all side effects of negative emotion. And then the author wants to make a distinction that if the positive emotions are coming through ego, then in just matter of no time, those positive emotions can easily turn to negative emotions. And he makes a statement that positive emotions generated by the ego already contain within themselves the opposite into which they can quickly run. And the example is that what the ego calls love is possessiveness and addictive clinging that can turn into hate within a second. And next example which the author gives is the anticipation about an upcoming event which the ego's over-evaluation of the future easily turns into the opposite, letdown or disappointment when the event is over and doesn't fulfill the ego's expectations. And at least in present situation, I could found one example which fulfills that is that when elections were happening, there was a statement of "अच्छे दिन आने वाले हैं," and very easily when period got over and that it has become more of a joke and essentially has been a bit let down. And because probably those positive emotions were artificially created. When the more you believe in it, the more letdown you'll have when things are back to the normal. And
So you're calling these things as normal.
so it's normal, right? If you have artificially created positive emotion, then and actually I heard statements like things will change. He'll make a lot of good decisions, and I believe that any decision you make has a chance of turning out to be bad. So this is the underlying assumption that new government will make good decisions and everything will turn out to be good. The more decisions they take, some have to turn out to be wrong or will have the wrong effect. So I never believed that feel good story. It's a personal thing. And the next section is the duck with a human mind. And author gives this beautiful story about two ducks. And I'll just read out the story that after two ducks get into a fight which never lasts long, they will separate and float off in the opposite directions. Then each duck will flap its wings vigorously a few times, thus releasing the surplus energy that built up during the fight. And after the flare up, after they flap their wings, they float on peacefully as if nothing had ever happened. So think in contrast to humans, and even if we had a verbal alteration like on a little road rage when somebody tries to overtake us, and the person may have gone past, but that energy remains with us for a long time, and possibly we keep it alive in us in long time.
Basically, we don't against.
Right.
But that's generally, I think, children are on the side of kind of the ducks there because
They can immediately cry, immediately laugh, immediately friend, immediately fight.
so my daughter, she has a close neighbor friend on the same floor, and she usually invites me to evening. And in those 1.5 hours, they fight like they are the biggest enemies. And because now she's big enough, and she will say, मैं तेरे घर कभी नहीं आऊँगी, and तू मतलब मैं तेरे साथ कभी नहीं खेलूंगी जिंदगी में. And in the next moment when her mother comes to pick her up, both of them are crying कि यार you separating us again.
Yeah. And actually, I've seen another example is that once we were traveling locally in Noida, and I and my wife Bhavna had a fight, and my daughter was quietly listening to what is happening. And after some time, when the fight was over and the situation changed, and she was talking normally to us, and but we both were like feeling sad because of the result of that -5. And then you can see that the kids have come out of that that moments where the fight was happening, and they are normal, but we are still carrying those things in our head, and that was a like good learning. And to continue with that, the author says that, and if ducks, if we were ducks, this is what will be our reaction after the fight, and we will say statements like, "I don't believe what he just did. He came to within 5 inches of me. He thinks he owns this pond. He has no consideration for my private space. I'll never trust him again. Next time he'll try something else just to annoy me. I'm sure he's plotting something already, but I'm not going to stand this. I'll teach him a lesson he won't forget." This is the kind of human reactions we would have made if we are possibly in a duck fight. And the author wants to bring us the difference among the two. And next is the section about the carrying the past. And again, this is a short story about the two monks, which beautifully illustrate the baggage of past which we keep carrying in our mind. And two Zen monks, Tanzan and Akido, who were walking along a country road that had become extremely muddy after heavy rains. Near a village, they came upon a young woman who was trying to cross the road, but the mud was so deep that it would have ruined the silk kimono she was wearing. Tanzan at once picked her up and carried her to the other side. The monks then walked on in silence. 5 hours later, as they were approaching the lodging temple, Akido couldn't restrain himself any longer and asked, "Why did you carry that girl across the road? We are monks and we are not supposed to do things like that." And then the other monk replied that, "I put down the girl 5 hours ago, and you are still carrying her." And this essentially illustrates the baggage of past which we carry. And the author says that the past lives in you as memories, when memories, that is to say the thoughts about the past that take you over completely, that they turn into burden, turn problematic, and become part of your sense of self. Your personality, which is conditioned by the past, then becomes your prison. Your memories are invested with a sense of self, and your story becomes what you perceive yourself to be. The little me is an illusion that obscures your true identity as the timeless and the formless presence.
These memories and conditioning, etc., we talk about, but is it possible to have wisdom without the benefit of having learned and remembered from the past mistakes? And so in some sense, is conditioning or whatever I don't know if it's conditioning or something else, but is wisdom completely intrinsic, or is there an element of learning? And if there is an element of learning, then is conditioning also required for wisdom?
So one example which the author gives about is that later in the chapter is about the deep suffering. He says that there are people who suffer deeply in their present life, possibly because of the baggage which they might have been carrying from the past. But what he says is that sometimes this suffering leads towards once to get over it and leads towards awakening or wisdom. So I think there is this good correlation among if you haven't suffered, then it's unlikely that you can get the wisdom. But there are good chances that if you have suffered, then you can come out of it and try to have the wisdom. But again, there can be some element about the wisdom which you may be carrying from your past life, and it can happen is that suddenly, based on some events, that wisdom you can fully realize that wisdom. So that can be the second aspect of it. So that's my understanding. I don't know.
I get a feeling that what is referred to wisdom in the more conventional sense is basically internalization of knowledge. It is more material, more how the thing works, how the system works kind of wisdom. And that is usually not intrinsic. That is something that you have to acquire and learn. But the wisdom that we often talk about here, it almost sounds like a different kind of wisdom, which is more intrinsic, which somehow gets triggered. I mean, because if it is not intrinsic and if it is all acquired, then aren't you actually placing wisdom and conditioning very close to each other? Because how do you segregate the learnings as this is conditioning, this is wisdom, if it is all acquired?
Actually,
it almost seems like there is an intrinsic element of wisdom that we refer to here,
yes,
which is not what in the material life people relate with wisdom.
So actually, my sense is that anything, all those education or your scientific knowledge, at least the education, that is not the wisdom
Right.
we are talking about. The wisdom which comes about in these chapters, or at least in the suttas, is about this element of non-self. And it's not that you need to completely realize non-self, that you're not this body, but possibly once you start associating personally with things, that is, you're moving towards wisdom.
Just to add to, I think from what I feel that what you reach out to can be knowledge. You're trying to reach out to something. But when you, in different circumstances, can suddenly stop reaching out, right? And when things come to you, that I believe is only wisdom. And when I was referring to, for example, for my experience is, the more the clutter is in the mind, the more you're reaching out, the more you're trying to do. You're primarily acquiring knowledge, primarily acquiring material ways to get your life done. So let's take a few examples. For example, in meditation, that really happens. If you just kind of stop and calm your mind and stop reaching out. But in meditation, you're still reaching out also, then you will not get wisdom. And in suffering, what happens is that at the end of the suffering, you will not get wisdom during the suffering. At the end of suffering, then you completely give up. And your mind becomes blank. Because you are kind of done with it. Ab bahut ho gaya. And then suddenly a new thought comes up, yeah, I should have done that. When you are angry, during the anger, wisdom never comes up. But at the end of anger, when everything is fine, when the anger is not in the mind anymore, suddenly a thought comes up, yeah, isko aise kar lena chahiye. that thought does not seem like you created that thought. That thought mostly comes like that it appeared to you.
Would you think that that thought would come irrespective, whether you were a 5-year-old or a 50-year-old, and therefore is there an element of acquisition of wisdom?
So, I think so the acquisition of wisdom, what I believe is, if it has any dependency, it is on receptivity. The more you drop things and become receptive, it will come. The more you clutter your mind with the involuntary thoughts or the voluntary reaching out, it will not.
That may be one factor, but you would expect kids to be a lot more receptive than an adult.
Yes.
But when you talk of wisdom coming after that anger or that situation has gone, then that final thought comes. Would you think that a 5-year-old would be able to come up with a thought versus let's say 50-year-old? So even when the receptivity may actually be decreasing with it. So
I think the children, the rate of acquiring wisdom in children is extremely high. From not being able to find out how to behave in the world, simply observing the world and just receiving it. They actually become a lot more wiser from day 0 to the time that they become, when we start to call them intelligent, and they just stop becoming wiser. Because now they have cluttered their mind, they have cluttered so much that they stop being receptive. And the moments when I said are the moments when we become receptive because we have kind of given up, either through the suffering or we have calmed the mind down so much that it truly becomes receptive.
So, this intrinsic versus acquired, how do you look at wisdom?
See, we can see our own experience. Right from childhood, we knew that things are impermanent, isn't it? Have we internalized it even now? So the knowledge is there. The knowledge that one day we will all die is there. Of course, with the child it may not be there. Once he grows up, he starts understanding it. So, when you internalize it and it influences our day-to-day life, then we say we are becoming wise. Now, different people can internalize it at different times based on their previous life. That's where this issue turns up. And then it can get changed by conditioning, circumstances, teaching, association, authority. Everything can happen. So it's a mix of both. It's a mix of both. Something arising from within. If you see the stories of people, you'll be astounded. Read the story of Ramana or this blind saint here, Sharananda, Swami Sharananda from Vrindavan. Unimaginable at such a young age. एक बात पता चल गई तो take it to hint. वेंकटरमना को लगा कि मृत्यु है हो ही जाएगी सबकी, तो ये मृत्यु में मैं अलग हो गया, ये बॉडी तो पड़ी रही, उसको देखना पड़ गया. He took it seriously. Penetrated with it right up to. शरणानंद को किसी ने अंधा हो गया बचपन में ही, पढ़ाई नहीं, किसी ने कह दिया साधु संत ने, अब उनकी पढ़ाई थोड़ी ना असली पढ़ाई होती है, भगवान का नाम लो अपने आप आ जाएगी, ध्यान अपने आप आ जाएगा. He took it seriously and just gave up everything. He got really a knowledge which was absolutely stupendous. addressed Indian Council of Philosophical Research on what is the life. अंधे को उसने पढ़ा लिखा कुछ नहीं, कैसे मालूम पड़ गया? It's all interview. It's just like waiting for some ignition. Suppose the things are there. And we people are slogging to get some elements of this. That's it. They must have slogged in their previous lives, for sure. And you see Buddha's life, and if you believe the whole story, millions of lives we had in order to get the more and more understanding, put it into practice. Till it became a part of his stream of sankharas.
Is there an element of conditioning in the wisdom also?
Yeah. There is this conditioning which will eventually lead to deconditioning. When you listen to and read Buddha's words, they condition us. And you can take them blindly, like the traditional Buddhists. हिंदू हनुमान चालीसा पढ़ते हैं, बुद्धिस्ट सती पठार पढ़ते हैं, फर्क क्या हुआ? कुछ भी पढ़ लो यार. विदाउट बॉदरिंग की क्या मतलब है, क्या करना है, क्या क्या रहा है. सिंपली अनवाइज. बट समटाइम्स ये लिखा क्या, जरा पढ़ तो लूं मैं. ठीक है ना? आप वेद को, उपनिषद को पढ़ तो नहीं, उसको रिसाइट करने में क्या होगा? आप रामचरितमानस को पढ़ें तो सही, क्या लिखा है उसमें, कहानी को. वी शुड बी एबल टू सेपरेट आउट द स्टोरी फ्रॉम द टीचिंग. अगर हम उसको सेपरेट नहीं कर पाएंगे तो वहीं रह जाएंगे. इफ यू सी इवन दिस पर्फेक्टली story of the Rama. There's so much wisdom contained in between, illustrated through the life of Rama and others who live and all that. Or see Mahabharata, amazing insights are there. If you read them read them properly. If you identify with people and then take sides, Duryodhana बुरा है, ये अच्छा है, वो ऐसे हैं, ये ऐसे, see it as a can't gain anything. So there will be conditioning which can lead to wisdom, and that wisdom will eventually lead to deconditioning. Okay, then एक कांटा लग गया, दूसरे कांटे को निकालना. That is a kind of illustration which will be.
So continuing again with this, author says that most people carry a large amount of unnecessary baggage, both mental and emotional, throughout their lives. They limit themselves through grievances, regret, hostility, guilt. Their emotional thinking has become their self, so they hang on to the old emotion because it strengthens their identity. It's like completely identifying with your self-view. And then author further says that because of the human tendency to perpetuate old emotion, almost everybody carries in his or his energy field an accumulation of old pain, which I call pain body. So here is a definition the author gives for the pain body: the accumulation of old emotional pain.
Sankhara's aversion, what is said in this tradition. Sankhara's aversion stored in a stream of light. That is what he calls it.
And actually that was the question from Shailesh also. It sounds like pain body is same as Sankhara, but only the Sankhara of aversion.
Aversion, all those elements of creation.
Okay. And the next section is individual and collective ego. And the author is actually trying to say is that possibly there is this element of karma or possibly global consciousness which it brings is that, and the author says that then we are carrying this collective ego from our history of humanity. And I'll just read that the pain body, however, is not just individual in nature, it also partakes of the pain suffered by the countless humans throughout the history of humanity, which is the history of the continuous tribal warfare, hope and enslavement.
You can say communal warfare. Say tribal.
Communal warfare.
Warfare is happening throughout the world today.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Whole of Middle East, Iraq, Syria, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, everywhere you see this happening. Collective ego operating. Expression of the pain body irrespective of what reason it takes, whether it's boundaries, religion, or it's just people are taking out their pain through this experiment done in South Africa. I think absolutely super. That reconciliation experiment. I don't know why others are not willing to work on it. The pain body there must have been phenomenal. Hundreds of years of apartheid. I happened to see that some videos which have been put on the website. I was preparing for my talk in Jaipur. I thought I could see that. Chote hain. There are some feature films which have been made on that. Really effective and very, very marvelous.
It is effective when it is initiated by the party.
The person who has suffered, he first recalls what happened to him. And the person who has caused the suffering, he is asked to seek forgiveness. Absolutely. And publicly do it.
But why it worked in South Africa was the people who suffered were now in a position to initiate that.
And no, not only, they were wanted to take revenge. They had a great leader. That is why they had great respect for Nelson Mandela, they had great respect for Desmond Tutu. And Desmond Tutu happened to be a religious leader. He had to be an archbishop. So he had his own aura and he had worked for freedom struggle. So he had a tremendous aura.
But I guess what I'm saying is, this could not have happened if the rulers were still the white.
Yeah, they were the perpetrators.
The other way around.
They were perpetrators.
And that's why this experiment is not working in the Middle East or somewhere else unless the situation changes. If the dominant player doesn't want to do this, no one can. So that's why that was a very unique situation in South Africa. I don't know how it will happen in the. Once you are the dominant factor, yet you decide to do this, then this can happen.
Yeah.
So continuing further, the author gives an example of newborn babies, that how this past baggage of conditioning or the ego comes into them. And I'll just read the section. Every newborn who comes into this world already carries an emotional pain body. In some it is heavier, more dense than others. Some babies are quite happy most of the time. Others seem to carry an enormous amount of unhappiness with them. It is true that some babies cry a great deal because they are not given enough love and attention, but others cry for no apparent reason, almost as if they were trying to make everyone around them as unhappy as they are, and often they succeed. They have come into this world with heavy share of human pain. Other babies may cry frequently because they carry this sense of emanation of their mother's and father's negative emotion, and it causes them pain and also causes their pain body to grow already by absorbing the energy from their parents' pain bodies. whatever the case may be, as the baby's physical body grows, so does the pain body. And the next is a section about which I just mentioned, that sometimes the more suffering you have can lead to the path of awakening. And I'll just read the section that people with heavy pain bodies usually have a better chance to awaken spiritually than those with a relatively light one, whereas some of them do remain trapped in their heavy pain bodies. Many others reach to a point where they cannot live with their unhappiness any longer, so their motivation to awaken becomes strong. That's the example author is giving as a way out possibly.
It's about इंडिया में बहुत सारे saints हुए हैं वो born like they did not have huge pain
It
body.
is true. Yeah. Even Jesus Christ, the thief, died at such a young age, killed at such a young age. He must be a person who must have worked a lot in his past lives to reach a state of equanimity and compassion, forgiveness. Such a difficult thing. Think of forgiving people who are killing.
But actually, we make sometimes complete difference. That when we say awakening, we say that one needs to completely become like the saints who are completely awakened. But possibly, if slowly as the one stops identifying with things, that itself is like big awakening and big difference one can get in one's life and probably in the life
Right.
of others.
I'm not saying that suffering does not lead. In many cases, suffering actually does give you a lot more vision and vision. I think I was saying that Eckhart said that they have more chances. People who have not bigger pain body have more chances.
Yeah, but if you read the Four Noble Truths, that's the reason it starts with suffering.
He also mentioned some children come with a different baggage. That is very strange. Because unless you see it as the whole stream of life flowing, you will come to wrong conclusions. You see, यार ये तो 11 साल की उम्र में वो शरण देख के अंधा हो गया, ऊपर से वो अवेकन हो गई, ये क्या हुआ? The other people, if you see, they had to slog and suffer. So because we are not able to see their past, which they have gone through, we tend to think कि वो sudden हो गया. It's not sudden. It is sudden and yet not sudden. It carries a very huge, that example which I often used to give in my class of weighing balance. On one side you put a 1 kg weight, on the other side you put 1 gram, 2 gram, 3 gram. Even if you put 999 grams, still there is no movement in the scale. You put 1000 gram and put 1 milligram and the scale has moved. So if you have not gone through the whole story of 999 and you have seen only at the later end, sir 1 milligram में इसका हो गया तो जो पुराने जो 999 थे वो कहाँ गए, तो देखे ही नहीं. So you can get misled by those things. And then say यार हमारे पास का नहीं, we are not made for it. वो उसी के लिए था ये, वो हमारे not made for us. Let's carry on with our life as we have been doing. It's very practical. This is how exactly the people get into a confusion. You'll find in a family one person is spiritually oriented. बाकी कहेंगे ये तो ऐसा ही था हमेशा, इसको छोड़ो. He is a mutation. Forget about it. न जीवन जियो है कोई बात.
डिजिटल स्केल अगर आने लग जाए तो अच्छा हो जाएगा ना, पता चल जाएगा कितना ऐड करने की जरूरत है. पता है 870 हो गया, 130 और बचा हुआ है.
डिजिटल स्केल में आप ये तो नहीं जानते कि आप कहाँ पे हैं.
नहीं, मैं तो 1 किलो वाला एग्जांपल ले रहा था ना.
नहीं, उसी एग्जांपल में एक्चुअली
पता नहीं कौन से वाले से होगा. डिजिटल में पता है 130 बचे हैं.
व्हाट आई एम सेइंग इज दैट
दूसरी तरफ वजन कितना है ये भी नहीं पता ना. दिक्कत ये है. How much baggage you are carrying, that is unknown. That creates a real stochastic system. Just don't know what's going on here.
So only comment what I was making was that as you get to know little bit, what happens is that sometimes you are able to see कि देखो कि इससे attachment जा रही है, तो देखो हल्का सा गुस्सा आ रहा है, and that itself is very enlightening and that moment.
Jan Buddhadasa थे और even Sumedho talks of small Nibbana. उस बात को लेके उनको तो हेरेटिक ही बना दिया था बुद्धदासा को, तो उसकी किताब ही छापने को लोग तैयार नहीं थे because of these such words he used. Whenever there is suffering, you understand suffering, you understand the cause, then you experience cessation of suffering. So this is what is Nibbana. और क्या है? तो वो कहे मजाक ही बना रखा तुमने तो, everybody experiencing Nibbana, what the hell is this? So they used to get offended, and it's a way of understanding. There is an experience of cessation of suffering, isn't it? It may not be cessation of suffering for all times to come, but it is.
It may not be complete.
Yeah.
But at least you see some.
You can experience and relate it and then gain confidence that it is possible. So he used to say, small Nibbanas put together will lead you to big Nibbana. कहाँ की theory पढ़ा रहे हो? So orthodox people used to get very upset.
So I think एक जो sense मुझे ये समझ में आती है कि all these good teachers which have done great practice, they get some wisdom based on their conditioning, and the problem what happens is that they try to explain their wisdom, and but others can't grasp it because it's not wisdom to them, and then because they can't understand it, then they say कि ये आप गलत बोल रहे हो या ऐसा नहीं हो.
Basic reason is that is the difference between Samyak Sambuddha and others. Samyak Sambuddha has got a comprehensive knowledge, and he has the ability to see what to teach, how to teach. Others don't have it. So in the tradition they distinguish between Samma Sambuddha and Pacheka Buddha also. What to talk of an Arahant. So everybody from Arahant downward is one who has become enlightened by listening to a teaching. Pacheka Buddha is also one who has developed the teaching on his own and got enlightened. But he doesn't have that much past paramis, they say, store of paramis, to be able to teach it to others. To be able to teach it to others, you need a much greater, you can say, practice. What you are calling as paramis, you can call it as a practice. Practice of internalizing the Dhamma in all its dimensions. So your life stream is carrying that ability with you. So when you listen to Krishnamurti, you find his saying perfectly right. But then he doesn't appreciate that the listener है उसको समझ में नहीं आ रही है, and then he'll get upset. अरे समझ में नहीं आता.
Actually, same is the thing with when you listen to different Buddhist teachers.
Yeah,
They are trying to share their wisdom, but it becomes so different.
Especially with Rodney Smith, because he talks at a level. Then he says in one or two discourses, no, not only that. I got a course में अंदर वो feedback. I got a feedback that I talk strange things. You people are very upset. And उनकी उसकी वो associate Narayan, that lady. Narayan tells me that in every discourse I start with the background and I end up and don't tell what is the next thing. But then this is the way I am, so you have to take it.
Agitate भी हो जाता है वैसे देखा? Agitate.
No, because he is trying to explain abstract concepts. And people, मतलब जो सामने बैठा वो इसे हिलाते होंगे क्या बोल रहे हैं, अब पता नहीं ना सामने वाला क्या कर रहा है. Okay, so I think we should conclude and see if there is any questions. Shall I say that and then stop.
हमने दरअसल एक बार पहले एक राइटनिंग का भी पढ़ा था. And I think that also is perhaps related to this 1 kilo and this.
जो सतीपठार में भी कहा जाता है ना, भावनाएं पारिपूरी होते, भावना मतलब कल्टिवेट करते हैं, पारी पूरी होते मतलब वो कंप्लीट हुई, कल्टिवेशन करना है ना सती का। इफ यू सी दोज भुजंगास, उसमें जो पॉजिटिव चीजें हैं उनको आपको कल्टिवेट करना है, तब जाके वो परफेक्शन पे आ जाए।
But then faith has a lot of role. That's what keeps you going. Yes. Till the last.
Starting point is that